Reward-based dog training methods are the best way to train dogs. But what does it mean when we say reward-based? Dog training isn't regulated, so it's really important to know the answer. And there's actually an easy answer to this and a more technical answer to this as well. So I'm going to describe the more easy option first before we get into the technical definition for those of you who are more dog geeks. So basically, reward-based dog training, it gets its name from the fact that it means giving rewards for behaviors that we want to see more of and removing the rewards for behaviors that we don't like so much and we don't want to see so much. So let's use an example. Suppose you have a dog who jumps up on you when you come home and you really want them to learn to sit, to be patted. So if you were using reward-based training methods to help to solve this problem, what you would do is, first of all, you think, what do you want the dog to do instead? You want them to sit to be patted. You could actually pick other things. You could just say, okay, they have to have awful paws on the floor. But for this example, we're going to say sit to be patted. So you teach that using positive reinforcement. You give them rewards every time they sit to be patted. You pat them, and also you give them some nice food rewards too. Treats are a good thing to add because this is one of those situations where the dog is wanting attention from you, so patting probably will work quite well, but it's always better to use food in dog training as well. And then that's the giving rewards part. And then the removing rewards part would be if the dog jumps up on you, you want to remove the rewards for that. So basically, you don't give them attention. They're jumping up to get attention. So you could just stand absolutely still and ignore them. Or if you wanted, you could just turn to one side for a few moments and then turn back again. Now, if you were just doing that part, removing the rewards, it maybe wouldn't work so well because the dog doesn't know what to do instead. So it's really helpful that you have the giving rewards part too. You make sure that you're teaching the dog what you would like them to do instead. So that's an example of reward-based dog training in action. It's really effective. It works very, very well, and it avoids all of the risks of using aversive methods. And that's the reason really why it's so important to stick to this approach. The American Veterinary Society of Animal Behavior has a position statement on humane dog training, and they say, I'm quoting, based on current scientific evidence, AVSAB recommends that only reward-based training methods are used for all dog training, including the treatment of behavior problems. So that's really important to know. They are not the only organization that recommends this. Many, many organizations recommend the use of reward-based training methods. So that was the simple definition. It's giving rewards for behaviors you want to see more of, removing rewards for behaviors that you don't want to see more of. But there's a more technical definition as well. And for this, it helps if you know a bit about operant conditioning. Now, if you've ever done any basic psychology, you've probably heard about operant conditioning. And basically, we can define reward-based methods as positive reinforcement and negative punishment. So positive reinforcement, that's the giving rewards for behaviors you want to see more of, basically. And the negative punishment is removing the rewards for the behaviors that you don't like. So in that example that I gave you, when you're teaching the dog to sit, to be patted, you're using positive reinforcement because you're reinforcing them with treats and with being patted, and that makes them more likely to do that behavior in future. And you're also using negative punishment because you're simply not giving them any attention, or you're turning away from them briefly when they jump up on you, if they jump up on you. So you're using those two together. Now, for positive reinforcement, typically we're actually going to use food as the reward, some kind of nice treat, or it could be a dog treat, or it could be human food, like little pieces of chicken or something like that, or hot dog or cheese or whatever. That works really well. Now, there might be circumstances when we use play or we use patting, but most of the time we're going to use food. So that's another thing to clue into. If someone is using reward-based training methods, very typically they're going to be using food to train the dog. Now, this is in contrast to aversive methods, which now technical again, that mean positive punishment and negative reinforcement. And sometimes people find this a bit hard to understand because positive and negative are not being used here as value judgments. They're meaning that something is being added, it's positive, or taken away, it's negative. So this is a bit complicated. And so when they're doing research on the dog training methods that people use, typically they actually give examples of them. So here are some examples of aversive methods. In one study, they used a list of physical punishment, like hitting the dog, electronic or citronella collars, which could be either bark activated or a remote collar, a pet corrector, a water pistol, a choke or check chain, and a rattle can or other similar kind of distraction noise. Those are all examples of aversive methods. And in another study, the examples that they used are leash jerks, yelling at the dog, hitting the dog, and all of these are positive punishment, and also pulling the leash, so a jerk on the leash until the dog actually sat down. So technically that's negative reinforcement. So these are aversive methods. And because it is a bit complicated, I've actually got a table in my book Bark which lists examples of aversive methods, and these are dog training methods that you want to avoid, basically. And I included that table in Bark because it's so important if you've got a reactive or fearful dog not to use aversive methods because it just risks making the situation much, much worse. Now, there's one thing that I want to add to our definition of reward-based, because when we're talking about humane training methods, sometimes actually we use something called management, and an example of this might be using baby gates to keep a dog separate from children. For example, you're not actually training the dog, but it's a humane and a kind way to deal with a situation. So this is me writing in the Journal of Veterinary Behavior and defining what we mean by humane training. And I'm quoting again. Humane training refers to the use of positive reinforcement and negative punishment in training, along with management strategies that are not aversive. This is also known as reward-based training, and it's the same approach taken by a number of professional bodies. Humane management strategies include, but are not limited to, the use of no-pull harnesses, putting lids on garbage cans, the use of pet gates to keep dogs separate from children or other animals, and the use of a muzzle with appropriate prior conditioning using only non-punitive, non-scary techniques. So there you have it. Because dog training is not regulated, it's actually really important to understand what reward-based training methods are and how important it is to use them. They basically avoid all of the risks that go along with aversive methods, and then they have some advantages on top of that as well. So most of the time, someone who's using reward-based methods will be using food as a way to reinforce the dog, and they will be teaching the dog to do the behaviors that they want to see more of. So if you currently are not using reward-based methods to train your dog, it's a very, very good idea to switch. If you are looking for a dog trainer, you want to make sure that they are only going to use reward-based methods. And because dog training is not regulated, you might have to quiz them very carefully. You might have to read their website very carefully and make sure that you check out reviews of them as well. Because reward-based training is much better for you, and it's much better for your relationship with your dog as well. Let me know in the comments what your favorite thing is about using reward-based methods to train dogs. Mine is simply how much fun it is to teach dogs using positive reinforcement.